Good afternoon. Sorry, I don't speak any Spanish. I think I should learn, though I spend half my time in Latin countries, I'm really happy to be with you this afternoon to share some ideas about business, about capitalism, and what we're calling conscious capitalism. So as soon as I get my slides up here. So the subtitle is Creating a World in Which Everybody Matters and Everybody Wins. I really think that it's possible with business to operate in a different way, which is about creating shared prosperity and making sure that people are the primary purpose of business. And traditional capitalism has done a lot, but hasn't really realized the full potential that exists. So let's talk about what capitalism has done, because it is pretty extraordinary. If you look in the last 200 years of the impact, you will see that it's dramatically different than what was in place for the last 2,000 years. So you go back to the year zero. If you look at the economic history of human beings, per capita incomes worldwide were less than $500 for most of history. And this is adjusted for inflation, right? So which means that 90 to 95% of human beings have lived in extreme abject poverty, below less than $1 per day for the average person. Life expectancy was only 28 to 30 years, taking into account infant mortality. So that was the default condition of humanity, and nothing really changed for 500 years, 1,000 years, 1,500 years. You can see it was pretty much flat line. No real improvements. From the year zero to the year 1000, we actually went backwards. Then we come into the middle part of the last millennium, and we had the beginnings of the Renaissance in the 15th century. And that was a significant step for humanity, but had no impact on ordinary human beings. We also had the invention of the Gutenberg printing press, where books now became a little more affordable, but 90% of people were illiterate for almost all of human history, so it really didn't impact ordinary lives. You go another 200 years and we had the beginnings of the age of reason and enlightenment, science, understanding the laws of physics, laws of nature, Isaac Newton, Joseph Galileo. Again, dramatic breakthroughs for humanity, but no impact on ordinary human beings. And you can see that finally what did change for ordinary people was in the 18th century with the Industrial Revolution, which started in Scotland roughly around 1750. So now we had machines that could produce products consistently and at low cost, efficiently. And those countries that had access to this technology saw a rise in prosperity. But that alone wasn't enough. Technology wasn't the only thing that was needed, although it was important. We also had to think differently about how do we organize human society, and that came 25 years later. In 1776, to be precise, Adam Smith, who was a moral philosopher also in Scotland, wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations, or an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations, asking the question, why is it that some countries are prosperous and others are not? And most people would have said it has to do with natural resources or it has to do with the work ethic. He found that wasn't the case. That did not explain prosperity. Ultimately, he found it had to do with freedom. Societies in which ordinary people were free to pursue their passions and also free to trade with each other, that they would actually rise in prosperity. This is the so-called invisible hand of the market. That instead of the government or some centralized planning authority or a monarch making those decisions about the economy, you let ordinary people make those decisions based on their own perceived self-interest and their own passions. And that ultimately that would meet most needs of most people in society. So explaining the power of the market. Now that same year was the birth of the United States as a country, but also remember as an idea. The United States really is the only country, as far as we know in the history of the world, that has come into existence because of a set of common ideas, people believing in certain things together. And these revolved around liberty and freedom, religious liberty, political freedom, economic freedom. And this was enshrined in the Declaration of Independence that was issued in 1776, the same year as Adam Smith. And those ideas, which define the ultimate goal for the United States, of course, they weren't true on day one. Women did not have those rights. Certainly minorities, we had slaves, there was the native tribes, etc. But it has taken 200 years and more to start moving towards that vision, where, again, people are rooted in freedom and liberty. So the combination of those things coming together, the Industrial Revolution, the Intellectual Revolution, and the era of freedom in the United States, and then spreading to other places, you can see has enabled humanity to take off, almost on a vertical trajectory in the last 200 years or so. where per capita incomes have gone up about 1,500% in those 200 years. Life expectancy has gone from 28 or so to about close to 70 on a worldwide basis. Literacy has gone from 12% to 87%. And the percentage of people living in poverty has gone from 90% to about 9% currently. In fact, about 250,000 people are being lifted out of extreme poverty every single day, even today, because of the spread of free markets and political freedom around the world. So we can actually eliminate extreme poverty through the spread of capitalism. So the real issue in the world is not the unequal distribution of income, although that's important, but also the unequal distribution of freedom. If we can spread more freedom in more places, we will in fact find a dramatic difference. Now, despite all of that progress, however, the reality is that the amount of confidence that people have in big business is actually quite low. And you can see it's been coming down over the last 40 years or so. Around 20% of Americans trust big business. And think about that. This is the home of global capitalism, and people do not trust companies. So what has happened? Why is it that capitalism has done so much for ordinary people and for humanity, and yet most people don't trust it? There's something wrong with the way we talk about capitalism and business and the way we teach about it and also the way we carry it out. And there's a high level of cynicism and distrust. And this actually is very important because people, when they are cynical and distrustful, they cannot be creative and innovative. They cannot actually care for other human beings if they are concerned about their own survival. And most people, unfortunately, in the world of work are operating from that place, which means we're not getting the innovation and creativity that we need, because in the next 100 years, we have to reinvent just about every aspect of our life. We cannot do anything the same way in the next 100 years that we did in the last 100 years. So without all that innovation and creativity, human beings really don't stand a chance in the future. So the question again is, where did we go wrong with this powerful story rooted in freedom, voluntary exchange, individual liberty? Where did we go wrong, and how has that resulted in so much cynicism and even suffering, I would say? One of the big things I would say is that this idea of that only purpose of business is to make money. This narrow perception of business, that business exists only to make money. Every other institution in society, every other profession exists to achieve something, to do something, to have an impact on human beings. But for business, we say it's only about making money. And that's a story that actually is not accurate and also doesn't work. Because a very selfish narrative. It's also instrumental. It treats people as a means to our end. We're treating people as objects to achieve our success. Okay? And it's a very narrow understanding of the impact that we have. So this is, again, a harmful way of thinking about business. It really does not inspire people, does not motivate people, and therefore we have all of those consequences. So this idea that the business of America is business, as Calvin Coolidge said just before the Great Depression, is a very narrow understanding of defining business just as about making money. Herb Kelleher, who's the person who built Southwest Airlines into the most successful airline in the history of the world, I think captures the essence of where we need to be, that the business of business is people, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It's always about the people. People have to be at the center of everything that we do. Everything is a means to that end. Okay? Not that profit is at the center and people are the means to that end. People are the highest purpose. So that's one factor. The other factor is that the world has changed dramatically. So what used to work no longer works. It seemed to work for some time, the old way of thinking. But the fact is we have gone through dramatic changes in the world in the lifetimes of most of us in this room. People are changing at a rapid rate. Human beings are evolving. Businesses simply haven't adapted. It's like we're using an operating system that was created during the industrial age, based on the military as the organizing metaphor. Everything we use, the language and the way of thinking about business actually comes from the military. When you talk about command and control and hierarchy and strategy and operations and tactics and headquarters and front lines, these are all military terms. But we borrowed them because those were the only large organizations that existed. And therefore, when we had large corporations that came into being, we said, how do we run this thing? Well, we adopted the language, but then also the mindset. Somehow business has become a kind of war. Competitors are your enemy. Customers are territory to be captured. It's a very different mindset. Business is not war. Business is about serving people and taking them to a better place. Okay, it's the ultimate human thing that we can do. 1989 was a transformative year in human history. And all these events happened that year. If you remember, the highlight event of 1989 was the collapse of the Berlin Wall, or actually the bringing down of the Berlin Wall, which symbolized the defining debate of the 20th century between competing ideologies, right? Democracy, capitalism, and freedom for ordinary people versus communism, socialism, government ownership and control of every aspect of your life. And that was, we had to be one side or the other, right? And suddenly, without a gunshot being fired, that debate was over because we realized that was not in harmony with human nature. Human beings have a fundamental right and disposition towards freedom. We are meant to live in freedom. That was a kind of slavery. We also had the events in Tiananmen Square that happened in June of that year. The Berlin Wall came down in November. Again, kids standing up, those young people standing up to the Communist Party and the People's Army with their hunger for freedom. Now, that did not end well. They were killed, many of them, hundreds of them, but it did inspire people around the world. Also that year, we had the Exxon Valdez oil spill in Alaska. And this was one of the big environmental disasters, but not the biggest. But somehow this captured people's imagination. People suddenly became very concerned about the environment, much more than before. So it kind of awakened environmental consciousness. So again, all this happening in 1989. Also, the death sentence issued against Salman Rushdie, who was an author who wrote a book that was deemed blasphemous towards Islam by the Ayatollah in Iran. Right? And so this was the re-emergence of religious fundamentalism as a force on the planet, after a couple of centuries where we didn't really have religious wars or religious conflict as much. Right? So we've seen the rise of religious fundamentalism back on the planet. Another thing happened in 1989 was that for the first time in the United States, we had more adults over the age of 40 than below. So many societies, most actually in the world, are getting older over time. Why? Because people are living longer and the birth rate is going down. Ever since the invention of the birth control pill around 1970, birth rates have been falling. Industrialization, urbanization, etc. are contributing to that. So the birth rates are below replacement in about 85, 90 countries in the world. And therefore, median age is rising. Societies are getting older. In the US, we crossed the threshold of 40. Now, 40 is significant because it marks the passage into midlife. 40 is roughly the midpoint of a human life. Now, what happens at midlife? You might have heard of the midlife crisis, right? We joke about it and there are funny movies about it, right? People suddenly start doing crazy things, but it's a real thing actually. There is a crisis. It's a crisis of meaning and purpose. People question, what is it that I've been living my life all these years? It's about, material success, career, money, house, car, all of the stuff. And now we have a lot of that by that age, many people, and yet they feel empty. They have this spiritual hunger for meaning and purpose. What is the purpose of my life? Why was I born? What is my legacy? What am I going to leave behind for my children and for the future? People start volunteering for causes that have nothing to do with self-interest. They start setting up nonprofits and NGOs. Again, there's a hunger for meaning and purpose that is not being satisfied through their work, and therefore people are finding it outside of work because people want to be of service to other people. That is a human need that work, business, capitalism does not satisfy for most people. So again, that's a worldwide phenomenon. Also in that year, 1989, we're still stuck in that year, a technology was invented that changed the lives of everybody in this room and almost everybody on this planet, called the World Wide Web. A guy named Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web also in 1989. We didn't know about it because it only started coming out 1 or 2 years later. Only the engineers and scientists knew about it. But he invented this thing that has changed the lives of everybody on this planet more than any other individual has done, I would say, in the last 200 years. You think that's true? As we say in Washington now, that is a true fact. Okay, remember we have true facts, and we have facts, and we have alternative facts now. Okay, we live in a different world. This is a true fact. Because of this, the ordinary person has access to more information instantaneously at their fingertips, anytime, any place for free on any subject than the richest billionaire in the world did 20 years ago. Carlos Slim did not have that 20 years ago, okay? Ordinary people today have that. The other day I had a question and my daughter found the answer in half of a second. I said, how did you do that? She said, Dad, what did you guys do in the old days? You remember the old days, right? When you had a question, you couldn't get an answer. Well, we live in a world where you can answer every question about everything, whether it's what's happening in your company, or what's happening inside a government, or what's happening anywhere. It's a world of total transparency. And that obviously has implications for business. We are also incredibly connected. You know, in 1995, half the people on this planet had never made or received a single phone call in their entire lifetime. And now we have more phone numbers than we have people. And Facebook is up to 2 billion. WhatsApp is up to 1 billion users. Okay, we are connected together incredibly close today. Nothing like this has ever existed before. Anything happening anywhere can be known and acted upon anywhere else in the world. People can coalesce and energies, and we can have flash mobs and meetups and Arab Springs and women's marches and all kinds of things can happen because there's an underlying connectivity now that exists, a shared infrastructure. We are also more intelligent. Human beings are becoming more intelligent. This surprises a lot of people when you look at reality TV, for example. It doesn't seem like we're that smart. But we are becoming more intelligent at the rate of 3 to 4% every decade. Our IQ is going up. James Flynn found that when he looked at 80 years of IQ data, he found an average of 3.5 to 4% increase. When you compound that over 8 decades, the average person today would have tested at 134 in the year 1937, which would have placed them in the top 2% of intelligence. They would have been considered a near genius, and today it's an average person. So think about what that means. People are smart. Ordinary people today are capable of extraordinary things. Human beings are progressing at a rate, it's not supposed to happen this fast, but it is. Okay, this is dramatic. We're also far better educated. 100 years ago, only 9% of Americans finished high school. Today, 90% do. Close to 50% go to college. Korea is 75%. It used to be only 20% went to college. Of those, only 20% were women. And of those women, 80% went to education and nursing and so-called women's fields. And today, the reality is almost 60% of college students are women in most industrialized countries. Women outnumber men in college everywhere in the world except South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Women get better grades and they graduate at a higher rate. Every white-collar profession will be dominated by women in years to come. Yes. Legal profession, medical profession, and even business and entrepreneurship, we're starting to see a huge wave where women not only will come into those roles, but also rise to leadership. And that is going to transform human society. Because remember, for millennia, we have lived with every societal institution being run by men on a limited set of masculine values. Domination, aggression, ambition, winning, results at all costs. Everything is almost a kind of battle and war. And now we're starting to see the rise of nurturing, caring, compassion, relationships, empathy, also human values. We consider them feminine. They're in all of us, right? So we're starting to see now not only more women rising, but also more men being connected to the so-called feminine values. Where we have to be whole people. We have to embody the best masculine and the best feminine capacities within us. Right? And that we can do, and that's actually the subject of my recent book called Shakti Leadership, that brings masculine and feminine energies together. And finally, we're becoming more conscious. What does that mean? We're waking up. We're waking up to our own potential as divine beings. Now, for most of human history, we had to live almost an animalistic existence. Think about what it means to live on $1 a day. All you can worry about is survival until the next day. All you can worry about is yourself and your family if you have one. You cannot think about the higher things in life. They say this planet used to be molten lava and today it sings opera. Where does that come from? It comes from people rising above from that basic level and being able to explore the extraordinary capacities we have. Unfortunately, most people never get that chance. They say, most people are born and they live and they die with their music still inside them. They don't have the opportunity to bring that. But today, more and more of us are having that opportunity. We are waking up. We are understanding the consequences of our actions. We have a greater commitment to the truth and a better sense of right and wrong. What is acceptable today is different than what was acceptable 150 years ago. Slavery was acceptable in almost every human civilization, going back to the Greeks and Romans and Indians and Chinese. And today we cannot imagine. That only happened 150 years ago. 100 years ago, women did not have the right to vote. 75 years ago, we still had colonialism. India was a British colony, another kind of slavery. 50 years ago, there was still segregation in many parts of the United States. 30 years ago, there was still apartheid in South Africa. 20 years ago, gay people had no rights in the United States. Now, it's changed dramatically. So again, there are things that we used to accept, we no longer accept because they were not right. And there are things we're doing today we will look back on. We are also more peaceful. We are living in the most peaceful time in human history. Now, most people don't know this, but the data is very clear on this. Violence is down 90, 95, even 99% compared to historic norms. Fewer people are being killed in wars, by terrorists, by murderers, by accidents. Domestic violence is down, school violence is down, bullying is down. All of those things are down. They are signs of higher consciousness. It's a wonderful book called The Better Angels of Our Nature that documents all of this. Right? So we are living in the most peaceful time in human history. Again, all of these are indicators that we are more conscious. We're also more inclusive and learning to live in harmony with nature. So given all that has changed, how can we continue business as usual? As Lincoln said, the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. As our case is new, we must think anew and act anew. Our case is completely new. Everything has changed. Okay, a door like this has cracked open only 3-4 times in human evolution. Almost everything we thought we knew is wrong. We have to re-examine everything, especially when it comes to business. So what does it mean to do business in a different way? We have to change the why, the what, the who, and the how of business. Why do we exist? Not just to make money, we have to have a higher purpose. Every human being should have their own higher purpose in life, so should every business. Okay, and for each of these, there's an acronym. You can see healing, and I'll talk about that. We need to think about all stakeholders, not just shareholders. The well-being of employees and customers and communities and society and the environment is important, not just because it helps us make money. Leadership that is about people and purpose and not just about power and money. And cultures that are rooted in caring for people and that are rooted in trust and transparency and fun, and they're not all about fear and stress. So very quickly, purpose. Every great purpose, I believe, needs to be a healing purpose. Why? We live in a world of extraordinary suffering. There is so much pain and suffering in our world. And if we are not part of the healing, in whatever we do, whether we're in business or whatever else we might do, if we're not part of the healing, we may be part of the hurting. So our job in any aspect, as individuals and as organizations, is to make sure that we can reduce the suffering and bring more joy through whatever it is that we do. It also stands for the qualities of a great purpose. You can see those. It's heroic, evolving, it aligns everybody together. Now all the stakeholders believe in the same thing, that same purpose. So they're operating with a shared purpose. It's rooted in love and care. It's inspiring, it's natural, and it's galvanizing. Whole Foods had a purpose from day one. Educate people that what you put into your body makes a difference to your health and the health of the food system and the health of the planet. That's their passion and that's their purpose. That's what grew them from nothing to 100,000 employees and $18 billion in revenues. Right? Google has had a purpose from day one: organize the world's information, make it accessible and useful. And with that has come extraordinary opportunity to add value in our lives, because there's so much information and it can serve so many ways, and now it's showing up. Okay, stakeholders. The acronym here is SPICE. Why SPICE? Well, I come from India. Everything has to have spice, okay? That's why I like Mexican food too. But it also stands for the stakeholders in the right order. Society must come first. We have to be on the right side of society. We cannot be part of the problem. We cannot be adding to the burdens of society. That somebody else has to clean up our mess. I come from a place in India where the river has been destroyed by the businesses that operate around it. And finally people are waking up and say, what have we done? Not only is the river destroyed, all the life around it is destroyed. Society has to come first. We have to be on the right side. Partners, investors, customers, employees, and the environment. We have to make sure that we are consciously trying to create value for each of them. There's tremendous opportunity in doing so. There's the old way of doing things, and then there's the conscious way of doing things you can see at the bottom. And when you do it right, it's very synergistic, it's interdependent. It all works together, right? So you have your purpose, you hire people who have similar values and purpose, you give them lots of freedom, they're highly motivated, innovative, creative, take care of customers, do the same thing with your suppliers. Customers are happy, customers come back, sales grow, revenues grow, profit grows, investors are happy. You can also do lots of things in the community and in the environment and so forth. It's a virtuous cycle. But like any clock, it only runs clockwise. You cannot run this circle the other way. You can't say we'll focus on making a lot of money and then we will give bonuses to employees and we will donate to the local symphony and we'll do all this other good stuff. No, you have to do the things that create value in the first place, starting with your own people. Leadership. Peter Drucker said, only 3 things happen naturally in organizations: confusion, performance, friction, confusion, and underperformance. Everything else requires leadership, okay? You can put the most brilliant, well-intentioned people together. You will find friction, confusion, underperformance. You have to have leadership. Leadership is about creating a vision of what is possible and then helping us get there. And here the acronym that we use is selfless. You have to be selfless. You have to transcend the self. A selfish human being can never be a good leader, because that means you're using other people to achieve your goals. That makes you a tyrant. That is the definition of a tyrant. That is not a leader. A leader is there to serve, to help create a shared vision and then help us how do we get there. Transcend the self. It stands for these qualities as well, as you can see, strength, enthusiasm. You can see a blend there of masculine and feminine. You have to be strong, but you have to be rooted in love and care. You have to have emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and systems intelligence. And all the great leaders in human history that have transformed our lives for the better, whether it's Lincoln or Gandhi or Mandela or King, they have had that combination. Leaders who are only rooted in strength nearly destroyed human civilization in the last century. Okay, last piece is culture. As Drucker said, culture eats strategy for lunch. We think it doesn't wait. Culture is so important. Everybody knows the strategy of every great company. There are no secrets. We can't recreate it because the culture is unique. And we have to pay attention to the culture. And the acronym here is tactile. Tactile is something you can feel. You walk into a Southwest Airlines flight or a Wegmans or a Patagonia or a Trader Joe's, and you feel the positive energy. But it also stands for these qualities, and the one that I'm going to focus on for the remaining few minutes is caring. The fundamental difference is that conscious businesses are rooted in this idea of love and care. Traditional capitalism is only about self-interest, defined narrowly as financial interest. Conscious businesses recognize that human beings are also motivated by the need to care for each other and for something. Most businesses run on fear and stress. Carrots and sticks. We use carrots and sticks. What animal belongs between a carrot and a stick? Not a human being. It's a donkey. Okay? But yet we use that metaphor in the world of business. We have this, thank God it's Friday, right? This restaurant chain. I'm sure you have it here too. Why do we accept that idea that we look forward? People live for the weekend and their time outside of work. Why? Because work is miserable for most people on this planet. Heart attacks are highest on Monday morning. The Dalai Lama said this at a conference I was at. Nobody believed it. It's true. You can look it up. Okay, you can't make up anything anymore. People look up right away. Heart attacks are highest. Cortisol levels shoot up. Work is literally killing us. Murderers and terrorists are not so much in most places. Employee engagement is only 30% in the US. 50% disengaged. 20% hate their work. It's like we have a boat with 10 people who are supposed to row. Only 3 are actually rowing, and 5 are pretending to row, skimming the surface, and 2 are hitting other people over the head with their paddles. That's the state of affairs at the average company in the US. Worldwide, it's much worse. It's only 13% engagement worldwide. 87% of the people on this planet who work for a business do not care about that work. Think about that. It's such a waste of human life. Not just a financial burden and a loss, but also we only have one life to live, right? Except in India, we have many. Okay. But for you guys, one life, and we only have 100,000 hours to work, and for most people, that is drudgery and torture. It's just about how do I get through that, right? It doesn't have to be that way. Love and work are the cornerstones of our human as it defines what it means to be a human being. Why can't we combine the two? And that's really, in essence, been our journey. This book that I wrote that came out 10 years ago, Firms of Endearment, was about companies that are loved by all their stakeholders, and they, in fact, demonstrate love towards their stakeholders. We did a second edition recently, and we did the financial analysis at the end, and what we found amazed us. These companies outperform financially while they're also doing all these other great things. Paying their people better, providing better benefits, taking care of customers, paying their suppliers well, paying taxes at a higher rate, investing in communities and the environment, and yet they make more money. How is this possible? Well, the fact is they've aligned all the engines of value creation. They've got people who are turned on and excited and innovative and creative and productive. It makes all the difference. Every organization runs on human energy. These guys have tapped into like a nuclear source of extraordinary human capacities. These companies make a lot of money, and money is important. Profit is a social good. We are very much in favor of profit in conscious capitalism. Without profits, you don't have taxes, and without taxes, you don't have infrastructure, and you don't have social services, and you don't have all the things that we need in society. But it matters how you make the money. These companies make a lot of money, but it matters how you make the money, because businesses create, but they can also destroy wealth. Not just financial, intellectual capital, social capital, the amount of trust and cohesion in society, emotional well-being, operating from love and care versus fear and stress, spiritual well-being, having meaning and purpose in my life through my work, Culture, what does it mean to have a good life? Marketing and advertising define that. Physical well-being, our physical bodies, our health, and the environment. All of these are the consequences of how we operate. A conscious business tries to have a positive impact in all these areas for all their stakeholders for as long as they exist. And a conventional business says, well, our purpose is to make money. Everything else that happens is a side effect. Well, I'm sorry, there's no such thing called a side effect. Just because you say it fast and put it in fine print doesn't make it less important. It might be the most important consequence of your business. You do things and there are effects. All the effects matter. We cannot afford any longer the so-called side effects of a traditional way, profit-centered way of doing business. It has too big a price to pay. There's too much suffering that results from that. The expression before that phrase is that I'm glad the hole is not in my side of the boat. Okay? The reality is we're all in the same boat. There are billions of people struggling out there to survive, and many of us are fortunate, right? The reality is this is all one system. This planet is one system. We're all interconnected and interdependent. We are all in the same boat. We have to start acting that way, regardless of what we do, whether we're in business or government or education. Humanity is one spirit. We know that. We're all connected. Natural resources are finite. We are running out of some of them. But what is unlimited on this planet is what's inside human beings. There's a steel plant in Korea I work with called POSCO. At the entrance to their steel mills, it says resources are limited, creativity is unlimited. That's human beings. Human beings are the most powerful form of renewable energy this planet has ever known. What's inside human beings? We have not reached the limits by far. That's what we need to tap into, our inner capacities. Human beings are not a resource. A resource is like a lump of coal. You use it, it's gone. Human beings are a source. The source is like the sun that continuously generates light and warmth and energy and caring, compassion, creativity, innovation. Human beings are capable of all of that, but in the right setting. The human seed has never been more powerful. As I said, we are more intelligent, we're more caring, we're more conscious, the human seed, like a seed of a tree, has never been more potent. It can grow into something magnificent. But the soil is as toxic as ever. And the soil is the organizational context, the culture, the leadership. You can take the most amazing seed and put it into the wrong soil. Nothing will happen. We need to work on the soil. Those of us who are alive today can choose to lead the most meaningful lives human beings have ever led on this planet. Because our challenges are greater than ever. We are on the edge of so many crises. But so is our consciousness of those challenges, and our ability to do something about it has never been greater. Remember, we have 7 billion people who would have been considered near geniuses 80 years ago. We have access to all the technology, all the capital, all the know-how, and all the brilliance in people, but we need to create the organizational context in which those people can actually give us the answers and the solutions to all of our crises. They exist inside the mind and heart of some human being. We have to create the organizational context in which that can come out. So that's really what our journey is about in conscious capitalism, to create that kind of world. A couple of things here before I end. There is a field guide to conscious capitalism coming out next year. This is tools for transforming your organization, how to go on this journey, how to understand where we are and where we need to go moving forward. We also have our CEO Summit that we do every year, limited to 225 CEOs, coming up in Austin, Texas, just in a couple of weeks. And we also have a wonderful chapter of Conscious Capitalism in Mexico, which consciouscapitalismmexico.org you can see. We have chapters now in 32 cities and 12 other countries. So thank you very much for your time and attention today, and all the best. Thank you.